This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement. The Middle Ground Mike is fighting for truth and unity. Subscribe now or support us today. Links are in the notes. Stand with us. Stop scrolling. Whatever you think you know about what happened, forget about it for the next hour, because if the reports are even half true, the United States crossed the line. It has only crossed very rarely before. A sitting head of state, a sovereign nation, a lightning fast military strike, and suddenly the world is asking a question no one seemed to have been ready for. Is this justice or is this an empire? We're going to talk about this. I'm Joe. This is the Middle Ground Mike. Let's talk. So, I'm sure everybody heard, everybody needs to wake up. Last night changed a lot. President Trump just pulled off one of the most gutsy, lightning fast military operations since Panama in 1989. Remember, people, this is not the first time we've done this. U.S. forces launched Operation Absolute Resolve, over 150 aircraft, Delta Force commandos rappelling in like ghosts, bombs dropping at military bases in Caracas. And in under 30 minutes, they snatched Nicolás Maduro and his wife straight from their palace, blindfolded, handcuffed, and flown out on a Black Hawk. Then straight to the USS Iwo Jima, and they're in New York facing narco-terrorism charges. Trump drops a photo of himself on Truth Social, Maduro looking like the defeated leader he is. But here it is, folks, the first images of the chaos lighting up the Caracas sky last night. Here we can see, I'm guessing a bomb exploding. You can see in this picture here, some choppers in the background. You got some lights again and all that. Here is a picture of Maduro as well, but here's the thing. This was surgical. It was flawless. The most successful special ops raid in Lord knows how long, at least according to the public's knowledge, according to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Trump from Mar-a-Lago this morning, flanked by Rubio, Hegseth, Ratcliffe, announcing we're going to run Venezuela until a safe, proper transition. Our oil companies are coming in to fix the disaster. Billions in investments to get that oil flowing to America. Gas prices crashing, borders secure, drugs cut off. Or is this straight up empire for oil? Trump at the presser in pure boss mode. See this picture here. This is the biggest U.S. intervention in Latin America in decades. Bigger than Panama. Cleaner than anything Bush or Obama had tried. And it's still not good. But now the celebrations. Venezuelan Americans in Miami, Doro, lighting up the street like it's carnivals. Thousands waving the flags, crying tears of joys, hugging strangers. Thank God, thank you, Trump, long live free Venezuela. These people fled Maduro's nightmare, socialism, starvation, violence, and now they're dancing because the tyrant is gone in their eyes. Look at some of these pictures here from in Florida. But here's why this is key, and this isn't being pro one way or the other. Why did our government let this guy run wild for years? But in the grand scheme of it, they're very small in terms of overall that comes across our border, to be fair. And to be fair, even though Donald Trump said that we're going to be running Venezuela, they're letting somebody else from the existing government run things, but more for the face. But the backlash, it's nuclear, man. Left-wing leaders melting down. Brazil's Lula, unacceptable line crossed, grave affront to sovereignty. Mexico, Chile, Uruguay condemning military aggression. Cuba, Russia, China screaming imperialism. Russia, who invaded Ukraine, whining about sovereignty. Give me a break. The UN deeply alarmed. The UN's not going to do anything anyways. I mean, they don't half the time, it seems like. Even some U.S. Democrats, Schumer calling it fear-inducing. Barry Sanders raging about rank imperialism. And oil grabs, Republicans cheering. Vice President Vance. Maduro found out Trump means business. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Maduro's not the president. He's cartel boss. New dawn for Venezuela. This is on absolute fire about this. This is some of the stuff that I had seen. People calling Trump a savage, the new liberator. There's videos of celebrations going viral, memes of Maduro, cuffs everywhere. But let's kind of dive in a little bit more. The Navy task force, boat strikes, drug vessels, the tanker seizures crippling Maduro detaining Americans. I think people may forget about that part. Offering deals. Trump said no. Strikes instead. Delta Force executes 2 a.m. Local time down there. They used helicopters, obviously Black Hawks. Capturing at 2:01 a.m. Airborne by 4:29. Trump watches live from Mar-a-Lago. I mean, does the guy really ever sleep? And I'm not saying it is like a badge of honor or anything, but man, does he ever sleep? Implications though? The oil Venezuela has the world's largest reserves wrecked under Maduro. But Trump, the US companies can help rebuild. And at one point, US companies were there before Hugo Chavez took over. Sell to America, energy independence, gas under $3. But here's the migration: fewer caravans when stability returns. Drug cartels cut off. Could there be lives saved? That could be some possibility that could come from this. But the geopolitical impact, Russia, China, they're armed. This could escalate. Or Trump just showed them. Don't test us. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez swears herself in, but decisions now made in Mar-a-Lago, not Caracas. Rage bait, though, right? That's what it is. Hypocrisy everywhere. The left cheered regime change in Libya, silent on Maduro's crimes. The right hated forever wars, but now they're cheering this. The media was silent on Biden's failures with certain aspects that impacted this, but now staggered by success. Planned for months, CIA insiders, timing right after Maduro's inauguration anniversary. Oil player, or is it justice? You decide to let me know what you're thinking, because this is just crazy. Where do we go from here? This can just open up dangerous situations for everybody. It's something that the one thing I want to make sure that people realize is this has been done before. Doesn't make it okay. But before you go buying into any politician, left or right, or any foreign leader, this has been done before by not just our government, plenty of governments, okay? Doesn't make it right or wrong, but it's always important to have the context. But we need to call it the clowns, America. This is where hypocrisy hits maximum overdrive. Liberals who spent years crying about human rights while ignoring the mass starvation in Venezuela. People couldn't even get food or toilet paper. The torture chambers, the rigged elections, the millions of Venezuelans forced to flee. And now they're settling the world's leading anti-war activists. They were sure okay with getting involved in Ukraine. That's a phony tears. Where were your protests when Maduro's goons were gunning down protesters? Where was your outrage when his regime turned Venezuela into the world's largest exporter of misery and fentanyl? Not to the United States, to the world, to be safe, or to be fair. But the second Trump does what some people, not necessarily me, felt needed to be done in one clean, decisive night, suddenly sovereignty is sacred and imperialism is back on the menu? Spare me the lecture. You didn't care about Venezuelan sovereignty when the regime was selling it to Russia, China, Iran, Hezbollah for protection money. You only care now because it's Trump, the one that's doing it. That's my issue. And don't think the right gets a free pass either here. So before you're already hitting stop and going, oh, this guy's a right-wing nut job and da 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 da. No. The same America First crowd that spent years screaming about no more forever wars, no more nation building, no more blood and treasure wasted overseas. Now they're popping champagne and chanting USA over a full-on military intervention in a sovereign country. Really? You cheered when Trump said he'd end the endless wars, but you're silent when he starts a brand new one in under 30 minutes? Make it make sense. Is it America first or oil first? Because let's be real. The second Trump mentioned billions in U.S. oil investments to rebuild PDV USA, the stock tickers for Exxon, Chevron, Mobil, ConocoPhillips lit up like Christmas trees in futures. Coincidence? I think not. This smells like regime change for profit dressed up as liberation. Both sides are full of it. The left is selective with their outrage, and the right is selective with their outrage. But the rage bait doesn't get any hotter than this. The media, don't even get me started. CNN, MSNBC, the whole corporate press machine spent the last 4 years downplaying Maduro's crimes, calling him elected, even though he wasn't, and he pretty much admitted that, pretending the 2024 election wasn't stolen in broad daylight, ignoring death squads, the narco state, but now they're staggered by the operation's success, staggering escalation, unprecedented boldness. Yes, staggering because it seemed to have worked, whether you agree with it or not. Unprecedented because someone finally did it. It's not something that I would have done. But the same outlets that buried stories about Venezuelan migrants overwhelming border towns in some cases, what the heck? Americans are suddenly experts on international law now. Hypocrisy level. They're not, it's the journalists, they're narrative mongers. And the narrative today is Trump bad, no matter what he does. Rage on, folks, and this is why trust in the media is in the toilet. Not because Trump did anything right or he's great, but because you were okay when your guy did it. That's the problem. And that's why we have division in this country, because when your guy did it, it was okay. I'm not saying that what Trump did was right. I'm just saying when your guy did it, you were okay with it. The UN, laughable. Deeply alarmed? Yeah, they're always deeply alarmed when someone actually stops a dictator. I mean, look at history. Russia and China calling this imperial aggression. Are you kidding me? The same Russia flattening Ukraine cities and the same China that's building islands in the South China Sea and threatening Taiwan? Hot meet the kettle? You're both black. Their outrage is pure theater. They're mad because their puppet just got yanked off stage, and their investments in Venezuelan oil and debt are suddenly in jeopardy. Crimea River. This also has a lot to do with Russia and Chinese influence in South America that they're trying to prevent. But this event divides the entire planet right down the middle. Perfect algorithm fuel, perfect rage generator. Is it justice against one of the most brutal narco dictators in modern history? Or is it a long overdue liberation for 28 million suffering people? Or is it naked oil imperialism? The Monroe Doctrine on steroids? The United States? I think it could be all three. But once again, playing World Cop with bombs and Blackhawks. We were supposed to stop this. Venezuelans in Miami and Doral are dancing in the streets with tears of joy. World leaders from Lula to Putin are fuming and issuing statements. Regular of Americans are split, but some see strength and decisiveness. Others see dangerous escalation that could drag us into another regime quagmire. What side are you on? Drop it below. Drop your hottest, most unfiltered take in the comments below. But don't be disrespectful to one another. I want to see the sparks fly without people being jerks. We've gone through the strikes in excruciating detail, right? But it's crazy because, don't make a mistake. What happens when the dust settles in Caracas, right? Like, where do you go? This is where power vacuums, and then who knows if it's going to be some pseudo person from a cartel. Who knows, is this going to become a narco state dismantled before breakfast? But no casualties on our part. A dictator in cuffs, billions in oil on the table, if not trillions. But who's going to take it, right? We all think the news thinks they know, but we don't have a clue. Will Delcy Rodriguez actually hold anything together? Or is it going to be total anarchy? When things like this happen, anarchy tends to break out. And until we can get supplies there's going to be even more starvation. But, will opposition leaders like Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez finally get their shot at a real transition? Or will factions tear the country apart like it seems to everywhere else in the world that we intervene? Will we see American boots on the ground securing oil fields? God, I hope not, and that would be a tragedy. Will Russia and China try to retaliate through proxies? Could this be the spark that lights a bigger conflict? The questions are endless. They are crazily endless. The stakes are sky high and the rage is only getting started. This is going to make it very difficult for our negotiations in Ukraine. Very difficult. We just open mouth, insert foot. Because how are we going to sit there and lecture the Russians? What the hell? So don't go anywhere, because stay locked in, because tomorrow, Monday, we're going to go even deeper. We've got a special no holds barred breakdown with an expert in foreign policy, Ron B. He's going to really help us unpack the real dirt, secret oil deals already in motion, the transition roadmap that could come up, possibly, the fallout, who's really pulling the strings behind the scenes, possibly, and what this means for your gas pump, your border, your future. No filter, straight facts, and we're going to bring the maximum heat on this because this broke a promise. Until then, keep the fire burning. Like this episode if you're proud of the move. Share it if you're absolutely raging. Comment your most savage, polarizing take without berating people. Let's break the algorithm together. This is finding the middle, but today we're finding the fury and we're not turning it down. America just flexed harder than ever, but this could be dangerous for us. We have to watch everything we do. But God bless this country, and thank God those people came home safe. But, if you found value in this conversation and want to support independent, balanced commentary, support the show. As little as $1. Go to buymeacoffee.com/TMGM. I post articles almost daily on there as well that get shared on the Facebook page. Do what you can. This helps us cover the costs of everything. History doesn't announce itself politely. It crashes into the room and dares you to clap or scream. Maybe tonight was justice. Maybe it was necessary. Or maybe we just normalize something we'll regret later. Removing a tyrant is easy. Living with the precedent isn't. Power doesn't disappear when the camera's shut off. It remembers what it was allowed to do. And ask yourself not what side you're on, but what you're willing to accept when your side is in charge. I'm Joe. This is Finding the Middle. No left, no right, just forward. I'll see you Monday.